Good afternoon, everyone. You know, we spend a lot of time waiting in line, don't we? This past week, I had to mail a form to the city of New York for a wedding that I'm going to be doing there in a couple of months, and I needed a $15 money order to put in with the form and send it off, so I decided to go to Weiss's and the little post office that's there. So I went to Weiss's and I stood in line and waited and waited and waited. I finally got up to the counter and I said, I need a $15 money order. She said, oh, you have to go over there and wait in line. So I went over there and I waited and waited. Finally got my $15 money order. Went back to the post office line. Waited and waited and waited. I get up to the front. I said, now I just need an envelope. She says, oh, it's over there. So I went over there and got the envelope. Got back in line again. Right? Waited and waited. Finally got up there. And I hope it got to New York City. Let me tell you. An MIT professor has estimated that the average American spends a total of 2 years of his or her lifetime waiting in line. It's a lot of waiting. Life, in a very real way, I think, is kind of like waiting. We are expecting something, are we not? It is a journey that has an end, but we haven't yet reached it. Our lives as Christians is much like waiting in line. The first reading from the book of Wisdom. The author of Wisdom recalls the Passover night of Israel and how the people of Israel waited to be liberated by God. Your people, Wisdom says, awaited the salvation of the just. They were waiting for their freedom from slavery after centuries being under the rule of the Egyptians. And then the people of Israel, of course, go out into the desert, and for 40 years they wait to enter into the promised land. And of course, the very reason for, if you will, the people of Israel was to await the Messiah. And at last, he comes. We too, as Christians, wait, do we not? Our life is, as the Lord himself says in our gospel, is a way of waiting for the Lord to return. He advises us, gird your loins and light your lamps, like servants who await their master's return. Life is like waiting online. What makes it possible? What is it that helps us as we wait there for the line to finally end and our turn to come? I would suggest that the one virtue that we need most of all in order to help us persevere on this long waiting line of life is the virtue of faith. The virtue of faith. Our Holy Father, Pope Francis, just recently wrote an encyclical letter called Lumen Fide, the light of faith. I would recommend to every one of you here to get a copy of it and read it. It is a profound meditation and explanation of this all-important virtue, a virtue that we need every day of our life. He says, faith sees. He says it sees to the extent that it journeys, to the extent that it chooses to enter into the horizons opened up by God's Word. And in our life, God's Word is open for us in this journey of life, and faith helps us see where we're going. Faith helps us give meaning to our patient waiting. Faith helps us to understand the meaning of those sufferings in our life and those obstacles that are at times very hard to overcome. We don't know exactly when the Lord will come for us and to say that our life is over. But if we're living by faith, we're going to be like those vigilant servants described in the gospel who are ready for the Master's return. Faith, you see, gives us the true and full vision of reality. It literally, as the Pope says, helps us to see. It is a light for this line of life. It doesn't oppose our human reason whatsoever. This is a real fallacy that unfortunately our culture is affected by, which comes from the Enlightenment, that somehow only human reason can tell us what life is all about. No. Faith isn't opposed to reason. Faith is a light that goes beyond what our intelligence, which is rather limited and small, can understand. Faith helps us peer into that eternal meaning of life and of death. It's precisely faith that we need in order to wait online. However, we have to realize that if you and I are going to live by this virtue, if we're really going to be men and women of faith, it's going to take a commitment on our part. A whole, lifelong, selfless commitment to living the virtue of faith. Let me give you an example. I was once a college student who, in his speech class, decided to give a speech on faith. So he began in a rather unusual way, and he started to explain the law of the pendulum. You know that a pendulum, once you send it out, it comes back, but it doesn't come back to the same spot. It's a little bit less than where it started out, right? And so this student, to demonstrate it, put a little child's toy on a string and attached it to the blackboard, and he pulled it back and let it go, and when it came back, he marked it on the board. And then when it came back the second time, he marked it until it finally stopped. And he said, here's the law of the pendulum. So, he said to the class and to the professor, do you believe in the law of the pendulum? And everyone said, well, yes, that will happen every time you have a pendulum. So then he said, all right. He asked the professor, could you please sit on your desk? And before class, this student had put a 250-pound metal weight and tied it to a 500-pound test parachute cord in the middle of the room. And so he had the professor sit on his desk at one end, and he pulled this 250-pound metal weight right to the nose of the professor. And he said, now I'm going to let this go. Do you believe in the law of the pendulum? And after a little bit of silence, the professor said, well, yes. So the student let it go. And it swung out and started coming back. Well, you never saw someone move so fast off a desk in your entire life. He was gone. And he said, now, did he believe in the law of the pendulum? No. You see, faith takes a commitment. It is clear about things and is self-convicted. Indeed, it's a risk in life, yes. But it's a risk that is based on a complete trust in God who will not deceive us. And when he promises us that if we are faithful to him in this life, and we are vigilant like those servants in the gospel, we will be rewarded when the Son of Man comes. Faith is willing to wait, is able to wait. It doesn't complain when things don't go my way. It knows that life has an eternal meaning, not just a temporal one. It lives each day, no matter whether I feel good or bad, with love. It doesn't act like a cafeteria Catholic that picks and chooses what it wants to believe. It's all in. It's committed. Faith is a commitment that gives us a true meaning of life. It's not afraid to wait, for we know by faith that what awaits us is an eternity. And so, the next time you find yourself in line, waiting, pray. Pray for an increase of faith in God, so that God will find us alert and awake with faith when He comes.